It's not often that I get an opportunity to introduce a close friend of mine. But when Phi Theta Kappa and I were talking about different speakers that we wanted to have, one person emerged, and that was Dr. RaJade Barry James. Not only was Dr. James one of my closest colleagues when I started to work at Kane University, but again, it was that spirit of collaboration and partnership that really drew us together. I first started working in student life, and she started working in institutional research. But it was our passion for being able to work with students that cut across academic, student life, human resources, administration and finance, all those different areas that brought us together. In her work, she went on to get her PhD from Rutgers University, and her dissertation was around the topic of affirmative action. What I admire about Dr. James is not only is she a scholar, a distinguished scholar, but she also is a practitioner in the fields of public administration. Recently, she was in New Jersey about a month ago because she was doing some research on poverty and around homelessness. So she traveled through New York and through Pennsylvania, and not only did she walk the streets of those cities, but she also partnered with local organizations around homeless shelters, spent the night in those organizations, and worked with them to be able to share that resources with her local partners back in North Carolina. This is through her community outreach. But here today, we brought Dr. James to be able to share with us and be able to understand how does tolerance work in terms of higher education, our practices, our beliefs. How do we move forward? How do we continue to build and sustain a community of inclusiveness, of welcoming others? How do we, as a community, be able to have students, faculty, and staff be able to sustain the work that we have been doing here at Raritan under the myriad of different diversity programs that we have. So again, it is my pleasure to be able to introduce a colleague, a scholar, and someone who I consider my friend here to Raritan. So let's just welcome Dr. James.
Thank you. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. It's just my pleasure to be back in the great state of New Jersey. As Rishaleen mentioned, I am a Jersey girl. I was born and raised and in a lot of ways praised in New Jersey. Everything I am and everything that I hope to be is because of my affiliation with New Jersey. So I'm not going to cry before I talk about how great New Jersey is. I do want to talk about some thoughts I have about winning the race, really promoting strategies for diversity and inclusion, not just in New Jersey, not just in the United States, but all around the world. I believe, like so many of you, that we actually can win this race. And I'll share with you some of my thoughts regarding that. I first want to acknowledge all of the folks who worked to get me here. Dean DeShield in the Office of Multicultural Affairs, that fantastic Phi Theta Kappa International Honor Society, all of the faculty, staff, students, and administrators. I just want to thank you all for embracing my online community and sharing the work that you do here. It has just really been phenomenal, and I'm overwhelmed with pride and joy regarding the things that you're capable of doing, especially to Raritan Valley Community College. You know, it's always an honor when you get invited back home. This is my first time on this campus, and what a great, great opportunity that I've had to interact with you. professors are long-winded. How many of you believe that? So I am trying in the time that I have to limit my comments to talking about the UN Day of Tolerance, sharing some of my thoughts regarding local solutions, talking with you about what I know from my own research on creating culturally competent teams, and also thinking about a winning strategy that someone from New Jersey shared with me recently. So this Day of Tolerance is not something that's new to you, not something that was just created yesterday, but something that we've been working on globally and locally. So globally, the perspective is that we must get to know one another, we must work together, we must respect and appreciate the cultures that we each have and that we each share, because they truly make up who we are. But then the other thing is that it's our human right, our fundamental human right, to recognize the freedoms of others. And I really think that's the greatest sign of respect. Not only do you recognize your own freedoms, but you appreciate the culture, the experiences, the language, the passions of others, right? That's what we're talking about here. That's what makes New Jersey so great. I've been all over the country. There is not a single state that's more diverse than New Jersey. We have to share with the world how great we are. Let's talk about this strategy. There are some things that we ought to know, though, as we go along to fight intolerance. And even the United Nations says it best. They say, well, sure, we have laws in place that give us and offer us protections. We also focused on education to promote access and opportunity, right, for people like you and people like me. We also have access to information. The internet has really created a bridge, if you will, from one country to the next, from one discipline to the next, from one state to the next. The reality is we don't have that divide that we used to have. However, we still need to promote individual awareness. What is it that we know? What is it that we need to know? And what is it that we still need to do in order to break down these barriers that seem to sometimes exist and really create intolerance? And so, while some people focus on the global context of our challenges, the reality is, yes, we have a responsibility to focus around the world, but we really have a local responsibility to get it right. And I really think that we can. Some of our local solutions deal with some of the problems that arise. Some of the local solutions deal with intolerance that we see. We also know that our government helps to promote, break down, address the intolerance that we see, right? But the reality is, more so than anything, it's really the people, because government can't do it, nor can business. Our countries can't do it without the people who live and exist and work for these freedoms and these acknowledgments and these rights, right? This is really about people. And so we can't sort of promote our discussions around intolerance on others or organizations or institutions. It's really about how we relate to each other. So I think we should assemble a powerful team, and I really think that we're capable of doing so. I mean, here's what a powerful team looks like in my eyes. We are a group of culturally competent people, and I'll talk a little bit about cultural competence shortly. That we're grassroots, a network, if you will, made up of local people wherever we are. This is a network, a pretty powerful network based on what I see. We also understand the path of others, people who have been victims of intolerance. I certainly understand that as a poor girl growing up in New Jersey. Many of you may understand that too. You may not identify with my income inequality, but you might identify with my issues around gender equality, my issues regarding being an underrepresented group, member of an underrepresented group in America, right? There's some ways in which you can identify with me, but I'm still a powerful part of a team. And so together we can craft what I consider to be a winning strategy. I think it's really important for us to think about winning in that regard. Now, I've done a lot of work in cultural competence. Most of my published work is actually with this regard, and I think that cultural competence really rests on 5 key areas. Knowledge, skills, abilities. You guys are all familiar with those because that's what's going to land you your next job, right? But also, attitude and awareness is what I think is really important. So from the top, we're competent. That means that we have something that we can share with our winning team. And so knowledge, what do we understand? Skills, what kind of training and experiences are you getting? Ability, what you can do, different from your attitude, what you think or feel. And then awareness, your perception, the ability to understand that there are things, policies, and procedures that really impact one group or the other. There are laws that really prevent one group or another from gaining access or inclusion, right? There are some ways in which we can become a competent team. So I love the business world because they're motivated by money. That would be the critique of the business community, right? That at the end, they're interested in the bottom line. They're also interested in the economic, social, and environmental impact of things, but they are interested in the financial rewards. So here's what Keynote says about how to make diversity and inclusion real. You all understand the reality of life, that sometimes we talk about things, we do certain things, but we don't always passionately believe in those things. And so if we're interested in making diversity and inclusion real for all of us, you've heard that saying, keep it real, right? There's a lot of meaning in that. Keep it real. In order for it to be real for us, we have to do a few things. Confront the brutal facts. The reality is some people have access and inclusion and some people don't. We have to own that, right? If we have colleges and universities that have significant underrepresented communities, well, that says something about them, right? It says that they embrace diversity, they believe in inclusion, but there are some universities where it doesn't look like you at all, right? I'm just going to keep it real with you. It doesn't look like you at all. It doesn't represent the true spirit of New Jersey, the inclusion, the diversity, the love of language and culture. Some colleges around the country don't even look like that. And in fact, I haven't had a class that looked like you in a really long time. What I see is beautiful. It is beautiful. The other thing is creating a disciplined plan, right? We talked with one of the groups about working the plan, right? There's some people, I talked to some future engineers, some future business folks, some future psychologists, right? The reality is every student that I talked to today had a plan, right? This is yet a stepping stone to their life plan, right? Something that they're committed to sticking to, something that they can articulate and identify as a life goal. Everyone has a plan. Well, if we're going to make diversity and inclusion real, we have to have a plan, right? We have to keep it real and make sure that we have a plan for that. The other thing is you have to declare yourself. How many people believe in diversity? Let me see your hands. Me too. How many people want to be included in the conversation regarding diversity? How many people? How many people want to be at the table when decisions are made about who gets what and how they get it and who gets access? Who wants to be at that table? Yeah, I'm one of those kind of people. I like to be at the table, right? And in fact, I like for you to move over and make room for me as I sit at that table and share in the rich rewards of diversity. I think that's okay. But the other thing that I'm a true believer of is mentors and support networks. How many of you had a mentor? Couple people? We need to do a better job at that, right? We need to mentor people who don't look like us, in fact, right? One of the things that I regret is in undergraduate school, I never, ever, ever, and you're not going to believe this, but never had a teacher of color. Never. I never, at the master's level, had a teacher of color. Never, ever. And it wasn't until my last semester of the PhD program did I have a teacher who looked like me. And when you consider how many people actually pursue a PhD, that's kind of sad, right? But my children, I have 2 girls, they have the same experience that I had back in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. They don't have any teachers who look like them. That's almost unbelievable, right? And so what that means is that if you can't see it, you can't be it, right? You don't believe it, right? Because you've never seen who you want to be, whose path you can follow, who you can reach out to, who you can connect with, right? Who you can be mentored by, and what network you can be a part of. I think that's pretty powerful. I think that being real honest about how real and important diversity is, being purposeful, having a plan, declaring yourself as a champion for diversity, making sure that you educate your organization on how important it is, and identifying mentors and a support network is a good example of keeping it real. What do y'all think? Anybody think I'm right on that? All right. It's not going to be easy, right? And in fact, even though we partner together, the reality is that there's always going to be a pitfall. You know, that's life. It's reality, right? I had some experiences when I was in undergraduate school that almost kept me from achieving my dream. And then when I went to the graduate program, it was hard, right? It's hard. Life is hard, right? But the reality is I always had people I could connect with, right? And so the connection is really, really, really important. But this is the other real part. I just came to talk to you like you're my younger brothers and sisters, right? Because the reality is that even though you put a culturally competent team together, the best team, the best and the brightest, when I leave here, that's how I'm going to describe the ladies here in the front as an example of the best and the brightest. These brothers in the back, an example of the best and the brightest. These ladies here, an example of the best and the brightest, right? When I leave here, that's how I'm going to describe you. The best and the brightest. But when people put you on the team, there are some things that you have to be aware of, right? The best in business says that there are 5 ways in which teams are dysfunctional. The fact that you're on the team means that you're part of the best and the brightest, right? But the foundation of the team is an absence of trust. If we don't trust each other, if we don't trust our communities, then the reality is we can never build up our team, right? I'm going to go to the next slide. Let's look at trust. Let's dissect trust and see if we can figure out what's going on. Trust is the unwillingness to be vulnerable. How many people relate to what I'm saying? You didn't want some old professor from North Carolina State to come in here and talk about how all you have to do is study and do your best and work really hard and then you'll be successful. You want me to keep it real and tell you the truth, right? The reality is that some of us, it's uncomfortable to be vulnerable. Anyone know what being vulnerable is like? I was so poor when I went to undergraduate school. I was vulnerable. You can relate to that, right? I had people who looked out for me, right? But I was afraid to disclose to them my vulnerability, right? Anyone in here relate to what I'm saying? Couple people. But I surrounded myself with people who allowed me to talk to them, talk about my experiences, talk about my disconnect, even if you will. And luckily, I was able to sort of transcend to the next level. But I was part of a great team. They were called the Equal Opportunity Fund Program, right? And these EOF students, we believe that EOF worked, that despite our income situation, our home life, the communities that we came from, and the schools that we graduated from, the reality is if we hung tight, we'd be okay. And we were, as it turned out. The fear of conflict. I am conflict avoidant, right? When you guys talk about me after we leave today, say, she came to tell the truth. because I am telling you that I am conflict avoidant. I'm very happy. I like happy people. I like to talk about happy subject matters. And if there's a difficult situation, I am going to find the most optimistic way to look at that situation. Always. That's just who I am, right? So when conflict arises, it really scares me because I don't know how to deal with it. I never did. So even at work, if there's conflict, I don't know how to deal with it. Right? I want to overlook it. I want to push it down and push it away. The reality is that I'm the less likely person to deal with conflict in the organization. And if you put me on the team and I see conflict, what am I likely to do? Withdraw, because I don't know how to relate to it. But the reality is if you don't embrace me as I deal with the conflict, I will not be able to share my ideas. I won't want to come back. I won't want to discuss what else there is to do. Dealing with the conflict in any team situation is vital to winning. That lack of commitment is something that I don't have a problem with. The reality is that I commit to things, like long-term commitment. I like that. I like to hold on to things that I love and appreciate, and you will too. I see true commitment from the Honor Society, their ability to host this event, to do research, to showcase the love of the university. That's true commitment. I see commitment in your faces. I imagine that you all work several jobs, that you go to school full time, that you run from here to there and everywhere, and probably you're really tired. That's a sign of commitment. The reality is that buy-in is really important. In fact, in teams, if we don't create buy-in with people who are alike or different, they will not share the best of themselves. We'll never get to the top if there's no buy-in. So be committed and stay true to the goal. And then this other piece is accountability, avoidance of accountability. You know, I'll tell you, this might be like a dirty little secret in higher education. Sometimes there are some challenges. Even if you have commitment and buy-in, the reality is that there's no accountability. It's hard to say to a colleague, you know, we were relying on you to do this and you didn't do it. It's hard to say to a colleague, hey, I looked at your academic program and it does not have any diversity. There are no women in your program. I think you should think about what that means. Or on a faculty, there are no women on the faculty. No women of color, no women at all on the faculty. That's a challenge, you know? I think that in this world, if we're trying to keep it real with respect to diversity and inclusion, we need to make sure that we see ourselves, right? Because if you don't see it, you can't be it. That's the reality. We need to see ourselves in the faculty, in the staff, in the administration, in our academic programs. We need to see ourselves there. That's an important part of the team composition. And then, of course, when we don't, I think it's okay to call people on their behavior, right? To challenge the assumptions that they have. And then the other piece is focused on the collective good. Right? I believe there's good here. I believe there's good in the state of New Jersey, and there's good in the United States, right? But the reality is if we don't pay attention to the good results that we see, we're in trouble, right? People question whether or not we're real. They question whether or not we're good. They're questioning whether or not our strategy makes sense, right? And so we want to make sure that we avoid this dysfunction. So how do you do that? Right? I wish I could say it was really easy. You might think about how healthy we are, right? Can we focus on our organizational health? Can we build a team that kind of hangs together, that's clear and concise, right? A team that's able to articulate what it is they want, what the plan is, the strategy, and what the outcomes are. right? Can you bring that team together? And when you can, you have to go back to the basics. You have to question whether or not you have the right team, whether or not you're able to articulate what it is you want, and whether or not you're articulating that clearly. And sometimes you can stand from a podium, you can sit in a seat, you can be in your office, you can be at a desk, and the reality is, no matter how much you tell people what you want, you still don't get what you want. And so what do? I've been talking about diversity for 20 years, really 30. I'm trying not to show my age, right? It's not that we don't have a diverse community, because of course we do, right? But maybe the focus is on the wrong strategy. The reality is that sometimes when we talk about the need for diversity, we don't look at the inclusion piece. We don't do an assessment, an analysis, if you will, of who's not in, who's kept out, who's not reached out to, right? That's our challenge. So I'm going to tell you, I love people. I talk to every person I know about everything that I think I know, just to make sure I get it right. I talked to a young boy a couple days ago. He plays basketball and football and soccer and every other type of sport that you could think of that really is focused only on teams, right? And I said to him, what's your strategy? You know, you're so positive and optimistic. You're always focused on the team. What is the strategy that makes you win? And he says, we don't always win. We never win sometimes. Sometimes I play a whole season and my team never wins. And I'm like, well, what's your focus, right? He says, well, you know, my focus is really on keeping my energy up. Really? He said, oh, yeah, I always keep my energy up during the whole game. I just keep my energy up. And I said, and what else do you do? I said, well, he says, I make sure that on my team we all have the skill, right? The skill that's necessary to play the game. And I said, oh, I get it. So having energy and having the right skill set means that you'll have a winning game. He's like, nope, that's not it at all. In fact, if you have one and not the other, you won't win. If you have one and too much of the other, you still won't win. In fact, you can't have either one of them and win if you only have to sacrifice for the other person on the team in order to win. I thought that was profound. You know, I really believe that the secret in keeping it real and creating diversity and inclusion is not really about the team. It's about the sacrifice that you make on behalf of the team, right? The giving of yourself, the focus on what's right, the ability to analyze what you don't see in the classroom, in the room, in the boardroom, right? So the sacrifice piece is important. So I want to leave that winning strategy with you. I want you to think about the sacrifice that you make today, that you're going to make in the future, and then the sacrifice that you'll make when you make it, right? Because when you make it, I hope that the room will look like you, but it may not. And so what you'll want to do is sacrifice your comfort to encourage others to diversify whatever boardroom, classroom, office space you occupy. So I'm leaving, this is my last slide. You know, I want to encourage you to keep your eye on the finish line, right? In order to win, I really think it requires sacrifice, true sacrifice, compassion for someone other than yourself, right? And so, it's simply put, we are like dwarfs sitting on the shoulders of giants. We see more and things that are more distant than they did, not because our sight is superior or because we are taller than they, but because they raise us up and by their great stature add to ours. I'd love for you to embrace that, just as a winning strategy. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Any comments? We have an opportunity to ask Dr. James about her own history here in New Jersey, about her own profession. As you transition through Raritan and think about your academic career paths, Dr. James, and she didn't mention this, but she's also part of a association that does program reviews across the country. So she has an opportunity to spend time looking at different information, talking to different faculty, almost at every institution here in the United States. So if you have an academic interest, if you have some information that you would like to be able to ask her about, now's the time. Don't miss that opportunity.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for your comments. And I guess I have a question for you, and it might be a question for all the students here if they want to respond too. So I was thinking about, I thought your comments about like accountability and how we need to be able to see ourselves in our faculty and in our courses and stuff was a really good one. And I think you're right to note that like this room is really diverse and our student body is really diverse. You know, I don't know if our faculty is as diverse as our students and as this room, certainly. And I was thinking about the history of sort of social movements, and sometimes, like, students have been the ones who've demanded more faculty of color, more teachers of color, and programs like Black Studies, Latino Studies, that would really reflect them and reflect their experience. So I'm wondering if maybe that's part of, like, holding institutions accountable, like the faculty accountable in terms of who we hire, if you wanted to speak to that. And I also just wanted to see if any students here felt like, you know, if there's a greater need for faculty diversity, if maybe like a student movement that would demand that sort of thing, or demand different programs that we don't offer here, if like maybe that's something you might be interested in getting behind.
Thank you so much. That's a great question. Where does the demand for diversity come from, right? Whose job is it? I really think it's the job of those of us who are in positions of power, positions of authority, and positions of influence, right? So for the last 3 years, I've been on the Commission on Peer Review and Accreditation. And this is the accreditation body for master's programs in public affairs, public administration, and public policy. So despite the fact that our standards of accreditation indicate that we have to have faculty diversity, student diversity, and diversity throughout the curriculum, the challenge is that some programs still don't. That some programs still lack gender diversity, racial ethnic diversity, diversity in experience, meaning that some people are working in the field or just students initially. It's a trying time, right? Because what we're trying to do is operationalize something that we don't really understand. One way of looking at diversity is to sort of kind of look at issues around proportionality, right? And we've seen that done with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Programming. What they do is they say, well, it's called DMC. It's something that almost affected all of you. It's disproportionate minority contact. So in communities where the number of youth are so small, the reality is that if you're African American, Hispanic, or Asian, you are sometimes 3 times more likely to go to jail than your white counterpart, right? In America, we call that injustice. And so there's some ramifications for that, right? What are those ramifications? So the federal government says, well, that's illegal. It's really unethical, but it is illegal. And so therefore, you cannot receive any federal dollars from the federal government. And so it's like a paternalistic kind of view on taming that kind of behavior, if you will. For accreditation, one of the things that I was responsible for, because at first I was a member and then I became chair of the accrediting body for the last 2 years, I pushed for a diversity plan. I really think it's important. If we don't have what we expect, that we articulate the strategy and not just, our mission, but also what are we going to do to live up to that mission? And then who's going to be accountable for that? And then how are we going to ensure that, we make some modest changes, right? So being able to hold people accountable wherever we see ourselves. Of course, students, we know, are very powerful in the state of New Jersey and around the world, right? They can advocate for things that we are afraid to advocate for. So it's not that faculty don't believe in diversity, but of course they do, right? Sometimes it's afraid to go against, to argue for, to encourage people to look another way. And I get a lot of times, well, we can't find them, right? And that might be true. So then we have to find creative ways to develop diverse faculty. Grow your own is my favorite plan of action. Look at all these remarkable students who need jobs, right? And so support them through things like the McNair Scholarship Program. The Southern Regional Education Board also has a institute. It's called the Institute for Teaching and Mentoring, which takes students who are interested in graduate school and promotes them in a way that they can pursue academic career paths. I think that's an excellent program, right? So getting people engaged in what we want, of course, like I see a couple of professors in the room already, right? Just have to grow our own. What do y'all think? Don't let me stand up here and talk all day. Anyone have any thoughts on what you want here? This is your campus. What you want, what you'd like to see more of? Yes, sir?
I mean, I think having a more like diverse faculty would be something a little bit eye-opening, because people from different backgrounds, different beliefs and everything, they always bring a different angle to, sometimes they break the norm of how we've been learning some things, and in this world, sometimes coming in a different angle may pay off for us. So I think it will be a great benefit just to build up on that diversity within the faculty, and maybe even going beyond that and just building it more up on the college campuses.
I love what you just said. I mean, you underscore the fact that building is what diversity does. It never takes away. It always adds to, our ability to solve problems, our ability to interact with one another, our ability to identify specific strategies. Diversity does all of that, right? Our ability to open communications across cultural lines, to understand different points of view, even to understand different types of research that we do. Thank you so much for that.
Hi.
Hi.
Just from my perspective of taking a World Civ 1 class, I find it very like biased in terms of like Western civilization. So maybe some of that, like learning about other civilizations. Like when I've actually read the book myself, and I found out about like parts of Africa and like the history of that, it really wasn't taught in class. So I think that's something I would like to see.
Mm-hmm. Now, would you also like to see travel learn classes where maybe you study a semester or two some world civilization, world history, and then go to those other countries just to see it on the ground, to look at policies and procedures, the way things are implemented? Would you be interested in doing those kinds of things as well?
Yeah, if the school gave me the opportunity to, I definitely would.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea.
Hello, ma'am. I would like to have some kind of social awareness club or social awareness study in this school, because with you saying something about social awareness, I could relate to that. The moment that you said that, I suffer that every single day. Social intolerance, basically.
Mm.
So basically, I wanted us basically to have a sense of some sense of understanding of what social tolerance and personal, or what you just said, individual intolerance is, basically, because I think people pretty much ignore the idea of personal tolerance, and they focus more on the why, like for example, sorry, I'm a little nervous.
It's okay.
They focus on like basically the worldwide views, like the war in Afghanistan, the Ebola virus, the war on terrorism, You get what I'm saying? So
Oh, I get you.
so pretty much they focus on wide perspectives that affects us in the world, but basically they don't pretty much have any consideration or awareness toward what goes on in our social environment individually. So people pretty much ignore the idea of social tolerance and personal awareness or something like that you just said.
Yeah, I think that the social intolerance, the personal awareness, the individual accountability, those are all wrapped up into sort of a cultural understanding, if you will. I'm working with a group of faculty at NC State, and we're looking at the Ebola virus. Now, I have to tell you something about the Ebola virus. I don't really understand it. I'm really afraid of what it is. I know that it causes loss of life, and a lot of people have died as a result. Well, the other thing that I don't understand is why some countries are able to eradicate it and other countries are not, right? And so I think that there's some cultural understanding there that can only be identified and figured out on the ground. So that means that it will take a group of people who are brave enough to go in those countries to talk to other people who have had family members with Ebola, have treated people who have Ebola, represent governments where Ebola exists, right? So me and a group of faculty members at NC State, that's our next research proposal, that we go there and we understand the cultural implications of eradicating Ebola. Because while we used to think it happened over there, we know that it's here in America, right? Although we're good at containing it. And so that's scary. I've not told my husband, so don't you all tell him that that's my next research initiative. But that's something that requires me to insert myself into the conversation, insert myself into the challenges, insert myself into developing strategies, because it's something I care about. And so, like you have something to share, right? We are now scratching the surface of understanding Black men in American society, right? Understanding some of the discriminatory behavior, for example, that exists, the lack of tolerance that exists, or our inability to embrace them in higher education, because that's a group that's underrepresented. And so you can be that leader in the discussion because you're here and people want to learn from you. So you have to see yourself as a leader, as part of the team to contribute. Other questions?
Hello. So I love what you had to say.
Oh, there you are. How are you? Nice to see you again.
I love what you've had to say about representation and mentorship, especially with race and gender. But I myself, as a queer individual, am not sure how I'm supposed to go about, looking for a mentor, finding a representation when the thing that makes me a minority or makes me diverse is not a visible trait.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, because I really didn't get into the discussion around the dimensions of diversity. So there are two dimensions, right? The primary dimension is, what you see, the things that I'm born with kind of thing. And then there's a secondary dimension to that, things that are likely to change over the course of my life. The reality is that I would say to you what I say when I go on any college campus. When I went to North Carolina State University, I didn't see a lot of Black people there, but I saw a very visible and vibrant LGBT community. And the first thing I did was I said to the director, I'd like to connect with you. I need an alliance to join, right? And so I'm able to connect with what I see. Right? But for you, you're able to do the same thing. There are people on this campus who care about you in the way that they care about everyone else on the campus. And the thing with mentoring is you can offer yourself up as a mentee. I'd love a mentor, right? That person may not be equipped to be a mentor for you, right? May not have the time, may not have the interest, may not have the know-how kind of thing. But what you need to do is ask and find, right? So when I was young, no one in my family had ever gone to college. I didn't know what college was all about. Somebody gave me an application and said, girl, fill this out, and I did, right? Because I was a good listener. And I went to college, and I didn't have any money, and I used student loans to pay for my degree, which I'm sure you all can relate to. And I never had a mentor, but my grandmother said to me before I left home, if you need someone, here's the name of that person. And I never called that person once, but instead I found someone and worked for that person, and she was my mentor. She taught me everything, how to speak, how to dress, how to engage, more importantly, how to care, right? I was lucky to connect with someone who was compassionate. She brought me into her home. She let me stay on the weekends. I was a really needy undergraduate student, and it was only by the grace of God and good mentors that I graduated. It was really trying. And so I guess what I'm saying to you is that you sort of can tell who is part of your community, who's part of your alliance, who really cares about you, right? And for those people, those are the people where you first start with getting a mentor. Because you're right, like you and you and you and me too. We all need mentors. And I have a mentor. He looks at my curriculum vitae to see if I'm doing the right thing. I ask him to criticize in a very positive way the work that I do, the research that I do, and the research productivity that I'm engaged in, right? And then because I'm chair of the University Diversity Advisory Council at NC State, in the history of the university, this is the first time that they've ever elected a chair of the committee. Right? And so you know why, because I have a caring heart, right? I care about diversity. I walk the walk and talk the talk. It's all about me, right? You can see it in my research, the work that I do, the areas that I'm engaged in. And so that's how you identify who's your mentor, right? That's how you do it. And you're right, you need a mentor. Everyone needs a mentor, not just today while you're here at the university, but every day and in every different aspect of the life that you do. And so you get to pick. Whether you choose to disclose which community you're in or not, that really doesn't matter to your mentor. What matters to the mentor is that you're okay, right? That's the real deal. You all think I'm keeping it real? That's real. Yep. Thank you.